Good evening, everybody. Once again, it's Keith here, and I'm sitting with Edward Morin. Edward Morin is a local musician here in Loche who's been playing for many, many years. I met him in 1985 at a local talent show. I was just about 13 years old back then, and he was playing with a band called North Wind. Um, I think he was drumming back then and stuff like that. And I'm documenting local musicians and letting them share some of their story and their musical history. So with that being said, Edward, thank you for sitting down with me this evening and taking the time to do this little interview. First of all, I'd like to ask you how did you start music? Maybe how old you were and who influenced you?
Thank you, Keith, for giving me the time to take part in your interview. But I was influenced by an old man named Leon Red Crow. He raised me when I was living at the landing. I was busing to school in Buffalo, and I was in grade 4. I had a teacher named Bob Nordby, and he was into music. So I convinced the old man Red Crow to buy me a guitar, and then that's how I started playing guitar until 1981. I moved to Loche, and back and forth Loche and Landing. That was after my high school days in Cut Knife. And then in Ferdinand Fontaine had a pool room he was just building, and then he completed it, and we'd go there to play pool, whatever, and Ferdinand played guitar. And
How old were you back then?
I was about 16, 17. Then Ferdinand invested in some music instruments, so Harold, Judah, Albert, Leonard, myself, and Ferdinand, we'd go there in the evening and jam. And then
This was before North Wind even started.
Yeah, it was before North Wind. And then Lawrence Janvier Ilo, he had a taxi and a school bus business back then, but he also had a set of instruments that him and Elmer McDonald used to jam on in his basement. So one day we decided, he invited us to go there, and we started up a group. We called ourselves Northwind, and Ferdinand couldn't come with us because he was a businessman. But we kept Northwind going for quite a few years.
What year did Northwind start that you could remember?
I met my wife at a New Year's dance in 1982. So 1983 we started the Northwind band, and I think it was 1985 or so, and I met Keith at a talent show. And then Northwind kind of dissolved after that, and then I was invited to for a tryout as a drummer for Flamebusters. There were a bunch of firefighters that were practicing at the fire hall. So I went there one evening, and Paul wanted to play drums, and I seen the bass guitar standing there, so I grabbed the bass guitar and I played bass for Flamebusters for 8 or 9 years or so.
That's with Paul,
Darcy, Stewart, Ken Roth, and Darcy Fontaine used to be our sound technician. And then we played all around the northwest side of the province, on the east side, Fond du Lac, all those places. And then I kind of retired from Flamebusters and kind of sitting there, and I was thinking about the young boys that were into music, Keith Shewchuk and his brother Carl, Dennis Bruno. So then I invited them over to my place, and we were sitting there and we were talking about starting up a group. So then we started borrowing a few instruments here and there from Albert Herman, Harold, and that's when Keith started the band. They were called Roadkill.
Actually, the first band was Keith and the crew.
Yeah.
And when we met, there was Stone Fox. And then we changed it to Roadkill.
Yeah. And then we went. I was kind of managing them, so I booked them some gigs in Pachunac, all over the Mission Hall in town here. Was one of our biggest areas where we were kind of getting a few bucks. And then I finally got into contact with Buffalo bar manager, and they were young, so we went played there, and in between sets we had to leave out the back door and sit in the truck.
I was like 16 years old back then.
Yeah. So about 91, 94, I think that's when I was kind of done on music. But nowadays, there's a lot of young talent out in Loche. I know a lot of young talent people, like if they were to get into music, it will kind of deter them from a lot of the negative stuff that's going on in our community. That's being a musician is it's a healthy lifestyle. You know, you can express a lot of feelings through playing music.
That's awesome. You know, with your early days playing music and playing in La Loche, can you remember some of the other bands that were maybe around back in the day? Because you know, before I started my music in '87, playing in my first band, you know, I really respected all the musicians that came before me, and you were one of them. So I just want you to know that I have much respect for all the musicians that came before me and before others. And if you can remember any musicians that maybe you looked up to, or other musicians that you played with throughout the years that you can mention.
Yeah. Well, another band that was very influential over me that's where I had to learn how. Well, I didn't have to, but I wanted to learn to play old time music, and I know about 4 or 5 songs on a fiddle, and I used to play with Peter Pichet, Frank, and them. I used to jam with them every once in a while, because Frank was the chief, and I used to load his bus and go in gigs in Meadow Lakes and all over the place with him. And now I have 2 boys and a girl, and all my kids play music. They all play guitars, bass, and drums. And now I got the beautiful 8-month-old grandson. He's banging away on coffee pots and formula containers, and I got
the
videos.
Music stays in the family.
Yeah, I got videos of him that he's playing drums already at 8 months.
That must make you very proud.
Very, very, very.
So when you reflect back at some of your musical days, can you think of anything that might stand out to you that you'd like to share with us this evening? That maybe, you know, maybe your Northwind days, your Framebuster days, because you played for many, many years.
You know, I played in a lot of bands, and like I said, I was part of you and your brothers.
You managed us when we first started. Yeah, you really helped us out. You and Albert Herman. And
for me to sit here facing you doing this interview, I feel very honored.
Wow, thank you. I feel equally the same.
Yeah, and I know this is going to be a good little project that you're working on. So everybody that's out there, I mean, don't be deterred by rap music. Country is still strong.
Well, not necessarily rap. It could be anything. I mean, seriously, music is music when you look at it. But I do see your point when you say country music, because country music is something that we all grew up with in the North. Would you agree on that?
Yeah, I agree on that. Yeah, it's just that I guess it's at our age where we like rap is a little too fast for our hearing. I guess I don't know. It's just like, But anyways,
but it's just nice to talk about the music that. That's been around the North here for so many years, and you being a part of that, and like I said, some of the other bands that you might want to mention that were around back in your day of playing. Can you maybe mention a few of them?
Oh, like I said, Frank Pichet and Northern Fire. When I was living at the Landing, my uncle Fred Morin and them used to stop in there and throw me on board and haul me along to come to the Loche or Turner Lake or somewhere, and that's, you know, listening to them and sitting in the back with Eric and kind of have a spare drumstick and hitting the drums with them. But anyways, with that, I would like to encourage all the young people of the Loche, whether they're male or female, like all this interview that Keith is doing. Like if anybody's interested in music, if you were to walk up to anybody, everybody will be willing to help and take the time to encourage you in music.
Well, I really like to thank you, Edward, for taking this time to share some of your stories with us and some of the history that you shared with us. If you can give a message to any inspiring musician or maybe somebody that wanted to get into music or start music, what kind of words of wisdom or advice would you give them?
Have fun, enjoy what you're doing, and don't be discouraged by any negativity. Because, like I said, you can express a lot of feelings in playing music. So with that, like, you know, don't be afraid, don't be intimidated. You know, if music is your game, go hard at it.
Thank you very much, Edward Morin. Merci, Cho.
Thank you. Merci, Keith.